let's discuss headings and paragraphs. Most of your text will be one or the other. There's obviously other things such as lists and tables and other pieces of text, but most of it you're going to see is usually you use those two main categories. So I just kind of wanted to give you some guidelines of generally how you should approach these, both for web and, to be honest, most graphic design, you're going to want to do something somewhat similar as well. So obviously when we're talking about headings are going to be useful for organizing text into chunks, which is going to make it easier for users to scan the information thereafter. So most of the time what people will do when they go to a website, you can think of yourself, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to read the heading, right? Like the main heading, the title of the page, and then you're going to start reading the title of each paragraph. The first thing you see is that, right? That's we'll talk about it later on, but it's a visual hierarchy. The first thing are images, and then it's the largest, most prominent text. So it allows them to know that that's what they want. And if it's, if there's a bunch of text, then they can use it also to scan areas. So for instance, if you were trying to learn information about, I don't know, about body text or something, right? I could scan through and be like, okay, I'll look for something that says, okay, that says the head, that says body, and then I could go from there, right? So by having those headings, it's a way of sort of allowing them to scan quickly and to find the information they're looking for, okay? Generally speaking, when you are formatting your headings, it should inform the user about the paragraph below. And what I mean by that is it should be kind of in a weird way, almost like a description of what they're going to read, right? So it shouldn't just be something that just purely draws them in. It should, you want them to draw them in, but mostly you want it to actually say what they're going to be reading. You want to limit the number of characters, so somewhere between 60 and 70. You do not want really long headlines. A lot of my headings some of my stuff doesn't necessarily follow these rules as well, so don't go like, oh, you didn't do whatever. It's because I'm doing a dictionary here. But most of the time you want to try and keep that as succinct as possible. You also don't want to add any extra information. And what I mean by that is, shouldn't say that. You don't want to add extra stuff that isn't necessarily going to benefit it. So you should only you want to minimize the number of words and don't put like extra things in that don't really add to it. Also, don't use questions. That's kind of a no-no. You're probably familiar with that just with your normal writing, right? You're not supposed to use. I almost do it as a joke when I write an essay. I'd be like, why shouldn't you start an essay with a question? And then I'll go through, and it's just because they always tell you that. You want to utilize keywords. So as we progress and when you get more advanced and if you decide to become a web designer, a big thing everyone's going to be worried about is going to be SEO, search engine optimization. And that uses basically what will happen is when you search stuff, use keywords, and it will look for sites that have those keywords. A big place to put those keywords are in your headings, because obviously those are the most prominent words. So if a keyword is in there, it's going to be more likely to come up when it indexes that site. Particularly if you could put those keywords in the first couple of words in your heading, meaning like if you want to write about dog food, be like the very best dog food that you can buy, and you could say, as opposed to saying like that would be one way of doing it, but would be even better is be like dog food something, dog food, this is the best there is or something. But it's better to start with the dog food if you can put it in the beginning. It's called front loading. Again, it's one of those things that help people scan when they're looking at the stuff. They're going to look for keywords that they're looking for, just like they would type in the search engine. If the word's in the beginning, it actually helps them understand the rest of the sentence better, even though my example was poor. So you want to try and front load as much as possible. Applying a hierarchy. So only the page title should use an H1 level heading. Okay, and so what I mean by that is at the very top here, like this one, is the only H1 of this page. That's the only one there should be. You'll notice that none of the rest of them are that big, okay? Because you'll see that like these are all H2s, each section here. So like this is an H2, right? So that's the idea with that. Let's go. Okay, scroll. Okay. So make sure that the first one is the only one that has it, and then subsequently you want to use your H2s for your main headings, then H3 for subheadings, so on and so forth. Generally speaking, you shouldn't be getting down to H5 and H6. Those are like, you're going too far at that point. Organize the headings in the most important to the least important. Just a general is usually what you want to do with any writing, is try to have the most prominent stuff at the top, right? And this goes into visual hierarchy as well. The most prominent things at the top, and then as you get more detailed and less important, that moves downwards, right? So your more important ones will obviously be your upper level headings, and the other ones will be lower. Headings should have content associated with them. So this is actually kind of a weird, important one. You don't want to have just a free-floating heading where it's just the heading and there's nothing associated with it. So, this is a heading, right? But there's text afterwards. So that is associated with it. You cannot have just heading guidelines and nothing else, okay? If you have to use an image, usually you want to use text is typically what you see. That's usually the pairing. You're always going to see a heading, paragraph text, usually paired together. But there should be something associated with it, not just the heading itself. Maintain consistency. You want all of your headings to be written the same way. So what that means is that you don't want to have, if you're doing instructions or something, they should all be written to look like, do this, and then next time you want to do this, and then you're going to do this, and then you're going to do, like, they're kind of a similarity. You want to be like, I really like, spaghetti, and then next one's is, there's a dog over there. Like, the first one you wrote in first person, and then the second one is not, you know what I mean? So you want to try and write them so that they sound similar, so that they kind of match. It's just one of those things where you want to try and create a unity within your own design. And that's just one way of doing it. Format, each heading should have it, should be unique. So what that just means is that, your main heading, right, the H1 is going to be the largest, right? Then the H2 smaller and smaller and smaller. That you can do it in a number of ways. Also boldness. So typically the boldness will become less as you go down as well. But you can also incorporate color. Color should not be the only way that you do this, because you have to be aware. We'll talk about this later on, but being ADA compliant, Americans with Disabilities Act, you want to make all your stuff accessible. So if you use color, some people are colorblind or may have more difficulty seeing it. You have to worry about contrast. So, but each level should be distinctly different than the other ones. That being said, they should all also be the same, right? Because you want them to match. There should be some sort of harmony between them, but you do want them to be definitively and noticeably different. Do not muddy up the text. What I mean by that is, do not write in all caps. That's just a no-no in general. It makes it hard to read. Sometimes it can be confusing because you might be writing a word and it's like you might write act, and like if it's all caps, that could be an abbreviation for something, and so it might become confusing. You don't want to write underlines. It makes it harder to read. Generally speaking, you don't want to use punctuation. You'll notice that a lot of the times I don't use punctuation in any of this. It muddies it up because it's an extra little dot, and it actually makes it more difficult to read, especially if the text is small. Obviously, headlines are not going to be as small, but it's just any of the extra little bits you generally want to let the remove those. Just kind of keep it as clean and simple as possible. Let them breathe. So what that means is you want to have space between your headings and the next areas. They shouldn't be so smashed up. The larger the heading, the more space you're going to put in between. So if you look, you see like this one's a little bit larger, so there's more space. Well, this one's, a little bit less, right? So these don't have as much. But then like when you have a larger one, it's much more white space there. Okay, so just make sure you give them space. Those are just some general heading guidelines. Paragraph guidelines. So the majority of your text that actually probably going to be, and the information is going to be your body text. It's really important that you try to keep these organized into paragraphs for easier consumption. So that's called like chunking. Basically what people will do is they'll try to take information and they will create association and keep those together, because it makes it easier to understand them as a larger concept as well as the details contained within. A big part of being a graphic designer, besides trying to make things visually interesting, is actually just organizing the information. That's literally probably the first thing you have to do, is take all the things that are alike or things that are associated or need to be together. You need to put those together, both theoretically and visually. Some of this, to be frank, is going to be stuff that you probably learned in high school. So basically, do your paragraphs, one idea per paragraph. Do not try to add more extra things in there. It should just be one simple concept that is described, and that's it. Do not go past that. All right. When you're writing your first sentence of a paragraph, that should be more or less a topic sentence, and that is for skimmers. Basically, if someone's going to read like this whole thing, what they're going to do is they're just going to read the first sentence first, and then that'll give them an idea of whether they want to read the rest, right? So the first thing they're going to do is they're going to look at the heading and be like, oh, heading guidelines, that's what I was looking for. And then they're going to read that first sentence and determine that's going to give them more detailed information, and then they'll really know that that's what they want to read. So it's really important to do that. Again, just apply the same rules that you would for formal writing. Create a logical order. So the paragraph should be ordered in a way that makes sense. I know that that's kind of obvious and also vague at the same time. What I mean is that if you're doing steps of instruction, obviously the first step should be first, and the second one should be second, and so on and so forth. If you're writing something about the new COVID strain that's out, right? You're going to want to put the most important information that people need to know first, right? And then you're going to put less important and less important and less important. You're going to try and organize it in some sort of manner, right? If I'm going to show, we renovated a house, right? I'm going to talk about the before things, and then I'll talk about the after things. So just try to have it in order because it'll be easier for them to follow. Think of it like a story. How would you explain it to somebody if you were just telling them? Back to the first paragraph, it is the most important. The users will read the first paragraph if they want to read the rest. Said that earlier. But also, the SEO prioritizes the first paragraph. So just like humans do, they will actually look at that first sentence and determine whether the first paragraph, whether that is going to be more that's closer to what the user was searching for. So that in particular is super important, which means you should utilize the keywords and also summarize the rest of the page. Just like you were going to do with that first sentence. This would be for the whole page, though. So kind of the same idea. Generally speaking, it's the same as it was with the headlines. Keep it brief. Each sentence shouldn't be more than 25 words, and you want to use plain language. There's a couple of reasons for that. One reason why you want to use plain language is that, for one, it's a lot easier to read. The longer the oh no, I talk about it down here. Oh, I guess it's the same thing here, but the longer the sentence, the more that it will text wrap, and then you'll end up with longer lines of text. And that's a lot harder to read if you're on a mobile device, which isn't really preferable. Another reason why this is important to use the plain language is that a lot of people are going to use screen readers. Again, this is for accessibility purposes. It'll be easier for them to understand if it's not trying to use overcomplicated terms or weird language that's just not common. Okay. Most paragraphs should only be 2 to 3 sentences. That was what I was talking about before. People, we live in a TikTok generation, and people will not read more than a couple of sentences at a time. And I find, I'm an old person, and I read books well, actually, I don't really read books, but I read things on pages before on paper. And even I will only read the first couple of sentences. Once it gets too long, I don't even want to do it anymore. So just make sure you try to keep those as brief as possible. Now, if you are doing longer form content, you can do like up to 6 sentences. But once you're getting up to that threshold, if more than likely you're going to be starting to creep in on another idea of theme, right? Like if you're getting up to 6 sentences, you might be able to just break that up into another area and do it, like separate it into a new concept, as opposed to trying to shove too much into one paragraph. Okay. Now, part of the reason why I was showing you this and talking about this is, for one, you need to incorporate this into your work. But also, what I want you to do is that we now have completed all the stuff we have here, right? Like we completed an HTML document. What I want you to do now is to go through, and I want you to customize it and make it your own. Okay. So you can keep the general formatting if you want, but make sure it's your information. And if you want to like add extra stuff or change some things or move them around, I'm all for it. It's going to be more interesting for me, and it lets me know about you. It's like another way of me, interacting with you. If only you interacting with me, really. So I want you to do that, and just make sure that if you are doing that, that you're trying to apply these general rules, because it'll make your work much better.